Hello there, Deanna Bedoya again, and we are following up our discussion on nutrition for BBK 140. And now that we've covered some key terms in nutrition, I want to start exploring the nutrients. Remember that nutrients are one of the main things we get out of food. These are the things we get out of food that our body needs to be able to do all the things it needs to do. And there are 6 main categories of nutrients, 3 of which provide energy to the body. These are called our energy yielding nutrients, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. The other 3 nutrients, they do not provide energy, but that doesn't mean they're not important. Of course, we know that water is that it's the most essential nutrient to our body. We need to constantly consume it to meet our needs. And vitamins and minerals, these are considered our micronutrients because they're needed in smaller amounts. They're nevertheless important. And these vitamins and minerals, they're involved in a lot of the reactions in our body. But we're going to explore these a little bit more in the next following slides and give you some more details about each of these categories of nutrients. And I keep saying categories because it's important to remember that some of these categories have a lot of different parts to them. So for instance, there's many different vitamins, vitamin A, D, E, K, thiamine, niacin, riboflavin, etc. Okay, there's only one water. Protein is just kind of one thing as well. But for instance, with carbohydrates, there's like fiber, sugar, starch, glycogen. Those are all forms of carbohydrates. So these are categories, but some of them have like other parts to them too. Another term that's important to clarify here is the term essential nutrients. What's interesting that on this slide, not everything here is actually an essential nutrient. An essential nutrient is one that the body cannot make itself and it absolutely needs from the diet. So water, vitamins, minerals, those are essential nutrients. There are essential fatty acids. There's essential amino acids. But some of the other things that fall in the protein categories, the carbohydrate categories, and the fat categories, we can use them and we want to get them from food, but they're not like essential. We can usually make them from something else too. Okay, so we'll start with protein, and protein we typically say is used for the growth and repair of tissue. It is the basic framework of a bunch of different structures in the body, like our bones, like our muscles, like my hair, like my skin. All of those contain protein, which adds structure. Okay, so like we said, that's important for growth and repair. And also proteins are involved in a lot of processes in the body as well. They do a lot of different things. So for instance, some enzymes are proteins, most enzymes are proteins, and proteins can be used to make a lot of like non-protein substance in the body that also help us get things done. Okay, proteins are made up of amino acids, actually 21 different amino acids that the body can get from protein. So there's 21 amino acids, and depending on, they're like the building blocks. I think of them like letters of the alphabet. Okay, so there's 26 letters of the alphabet. How many words can you make with those 26 letters? Infinite. There's 21 amino acids. How many proteins can you make from those 21 amino acids? Infinite. It depends what order you put them in, the length of the chain, etc. Okay, so we put amino acids in a particular order, and then that protein folds, which is going to let us create all the different proteins in the body. Okay, we sometimes divide proteins into animal proteins versus plant proteins. Animal proteins, which we find in meat, poultry, and fish, for instance, these are complete proteins. What does that mean? Remember, some amino acids are essential. Not all of them. About 9 of them are essential, which means our body cannot make them from anything else in the body, and I need to take them in from the diet. Okay, animal proteins have all 9 of those amino acids. So do a few plant proteins like soy, but it's not as good of a source of amino acids compared to animal proteins. Okay, plant proteins tend to be what we call incomplete, meaning that they're missing 1 or more amino acid. But don't worry, if you are a vegetarian or someone that consumes a plant-based diet, usually in Canada, we are rarely protein deficient if we are consuming lots of different types of plant proteins, okay? Because they kind of make up for each other. So this plant is low in one amino acid, this other plant is low in a different amino acid. I eat the two plants together, I have all the amino acids I need, okay? Usually for the recommended intake of protein, we use a measure that takes into account body weight. Okay, so we need about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram body weight, which is usually gets us enough protein. Okay, protein does provide energy, but that is not its main role in the body. Its main role is for growth and repair. Okay, we do get about 4 kilocalories per gram of energy from protein, but like I said, this is a minor use of protein. Okay, we do use lipids for energy. Lipids provide about 9 kilocalories per gram of energy. It's a dense energy source, which is why we use fats, why we use lipids to store energy. Okay, our fat cells store lipids, and by storing lipids, we have energy if we need it for later. The issue is we typically don't need energy later because we typically eat enough of it, but that's why we store most of our energy as fat. Okay, it is a main fuel source during rest and light activity and really long, endurance activities. So if you're exercising for like 3 or 4 or 5 hours, we typically in those later hours really get into using more lipids for energy. Okay. Another major role of lipids and why we need to get some in the diet is we need lipids to be able to absorb certain lipid-soluble vitamins, vitamins A, D, E, and K. If you are getting too few lipids or few lipids in your diet, then that's going to compromise this absorption, and it's going to compromise the processes that rely on vitamins A, D, E, and K. Okay, lipids, we see lipids, if you ever take anatomy, when we cut open the body, we actually see lipids around certain important organs like the heart, like the kidneys, around the intestines as well. And one of the goals there is to protect the organs and to help regulate body temperature, help insulate them as well. Okay, lipids are also involved in growth and development. They're really important for laying down new cells because our cells, the membrane is made of something called phospholipids. So I need enough lipids to be able to make phospholipids. Some lipids, especially a lipid called cholesterol, is used to make certain hormones. Like testosterone and estrogen, for instance, are made from, keep skipping ahead, are made from cholesterol, okay? And like I keep saying, if we are consuming energy in excess of our needs, it's already lipids, or we're going to convert it into lipids, and that gets stored in the body, okay? Something else to think about when we talk about lipids, the different types of lipids, unsaturated versus saturated lipids versus trans fats. In general, we recommend maximizing the amount of unsaturated fats and minimizing the amount of saturated and ideally eliminating the amounts of trans fats in the body. Unsaturated fats, these are the ones typically found in plant products, and they tend to be liquid at room temperature. So think canola oil, think vegetable oil, think olive oil. Okay. In general, it is believed that a diet that's higher in unsaturated fats compared to saturated fats is going to lower the risk of disease. I just realized these pictures are inversed. So this picture, we trade the places here because this is an example of unsaturated fat. Okay, saturated fats tend to be solid at room temperature, so think bacon fat once it dries, think butter, think lard. These are all high in saturated fats, which are typically found mostly in animal products. Okay. Saturated fats are solid at room temperature, like I just said, and they are believed to potentially increase the risk of heart disease. And in general, we can get some saturated fats in our diet, but we don't want to overdo it and ideally consume more of these unsaturated fats. Trans fats are often found, or less so nowadays, but still are sometimes found in like deep fried foods, but they tend to be found in a lot of processed foods that come in packages. So like crackers or cookies. But like I said, it's slowly getting out of the food supply given some regulations from Health Canada. But trans fats are lipids, unsaturated fats that have been modified in a way that actually kind of makes them more like saturated fats. Okay, and what we know about these trans fats is that diets that are high in them are significantly at the people that consume a lot of these trans fat are at significantly higher risk of things like cardiovascular disease. And that's why ideally we want to eliminate trans fats. If you are worried about the types of fats in your diet, simplest advice is minimize processed foods and consume more plants and animals. If you do those two things, I wouldn't even worry about all the things on this slide because you're going to do it anyway. Okay, so this goes a little bit further into each of those types of fats. And like I said, we want to ideally not overdo it when it comes to saturated fat, and ideally like eliminate or minimize as much as we can our trans fats. If you don't eat processed foods, I really wouldn't worry about trans fats. If you don't eat animal products, I really wouldn't worry about saturated fats either. Okay, and in general, we want to consume more unsaturated fats, especially our omega-3s, which we tend to get from cold water fish and certain oils like canola oil. These might have some anti-inflammatory and disease-reducing properties. You'll notice that I keep saying like might have, and it's something to keep in mind here when we talk about nutrition is that like we're still trying to figure everything out when it comes to nutrition, and it's hard to kind of prove things in nutrition. So we want to always keep an open mind and consider the new literature as it comes out. Everything we've talked about is kind of generally accepted when it comes to nutrition, but we always want to consider new evidence, and we're always kind of learning. It gets kind of frustrating because there's no objective what's best for you, what's not so good for you when it comes to nutrition. Okay, our next category of nutrients is our carbohydrates, and this is our primary source of energy for the body cells. Our body cells love glucose, which is a type of carbohydrate, it's a type of sugar. The brain in particular and our red blood cells can only use glucose, sugar, blood sugar, a type of carbohydrate, for energy, and that's why we want to make sure we're getting enough of that. Okay, so like I said, when I keep saying sugars, carbohydrates tend to be broken down into sugars, mostly glucose, that then can be taken up by our body cells and put to use. Okay, each gram of carbohydrate provides about 4 kilocalories of energy. And we sometimes divide carbohydrates into simple versus complex. So a simple carbohydrates, these are our sugars. These are our 1 sugar molecules or 2 kind of linked sugar molecules. So glucose, for instance, is a 1 sugar molecule, whereas something called lactose, which is milk sugar, is a 2 sugar molecule, okay? But these are sweet tasting and they tend to spike blood sugar. I'm not anti-sugar, okay? What I would recommend is making sure that you're not eating a lot of foods with a lot of added sugar. Okay, and in particular, we want to get as much sugar. If we're getting sugar, we want to get it from real foods like fruits. You're never going to tell someone not to eat fruits because they have sugar in them. Okay, our body absolutely can use sugars, but we just want to make sure we don't overdo it and we don't get a lot of added ones. That said, in general, we do recommend consuming diets that are higher in complex carbohydrates. Okay, so complex carbohydrates typically, well, we are often talking about fiber when we talk about complex carbohydrates or something called starch. Okay, complex carbohydrates are longer units, longer kind of chains of sugar molecules that take longer to break down, and they don't tend to spike our blood sugar as quickly. Okay, so in general, consume more complex carbohydrates, especially consume a lot of fiber. If you're eating a lot of plants, you're gonna get a lot of fiber. And ideally minimize our amounts of simple carbohydrates, okay? 2 more categories, no, I have 1 more after this. So we have 3 more categories of nutrients, but these go a little bit quicker. These 2 are something called our it says it up here, micronutrients. These aren't my slides, so it's weird working from someone else's slides. These are our micronutrients. So there's 2 categories of micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. And I know we often talk about these together. We're like, yeah, vitamins and minerals, but they're different categories for reasons. And the reason is that vitamins are what we call organic, meaning that they contain carbon in their chain, whereas minerals are inorganic. There's no carbon in their chains. They're just minerals. When I say they're just minerals, I mean, there's a reason a periodic table is here. because minerals are found kind of as is on the periodic table. So like calcium, iron, selenium, potassium, sodium, magnesium, all of these are our minerals, whereas vitamins are more of these complex carbon-containing molecules. Now, what vitamins do depend on the vitamin. There are about 13 different vitamins that the body needs, and what they do, like I said, depends on it. So for instance, the B vitamins are involved in energy metabolism. Vitamin A has many roles, but it's involved in like vision. Really depends on the vitamins. We sometimes say the vitamins help put the other nutrients to use because they often function as something called coenzymes, which help facilitate chemical reactions in the body. Minerals, these do contribute to chemical reactions because they can function as cofactors, which are like coenzymes basically. They help facilitate enzymatic reactions, but they're also really important for building structure in the body. So think of, for instance, calcium in our bones. I mentioned that we get nutrients from foods, but we also get other things from foods as well, like antioxidants and like phytochemicals. Some nutrients can function as antioxidants, but we can get some in the food that aren't nutrients either. Okay, so vitamin C, E, and carotenoids, and some minerals can also help with antioxidant activity. They basically help the body reduce the amount of something called oxidation. If you learned about oxidation in science before, your science class before, oxidation is the process by which we like steal electrons from a structure and that structure becomes oxidized. When that structure loses electrons, it becomes oxidized, and that usually damages the structure. So for instance, when our DNA gets oxidized, when our cell membranes get oxidized, that can damage those structures. Antioxidants, like vitamin C, E, and carotenoids, which is a form of vitamin A, those basically give electrons to that substance that wants to steal electrons. Okay, so it stops the stealing of electrons and the oxidation of other structures because it donates the electrons to the things that want to oxidize other structures. Okay, eat a lot of plants. Okay, a lot of berries, a lot of different types of plant foods, and you're probably going to get a lot of antioxidants, and you're probably going to get a lot of phytochemicals too. Okay, I dare you to Google phytochemicals, list of phytochemicals, and check out the list on Wikipedia, okay, or whatever other source. There are hundreds of these. Okay, so I'm not going to go over each of them, but basically these phytochemicals, they're like plant chemicals. There are these extra things found in plants that may have health promoting properties. So for instance, some phytochemicals have been linked to a lower risk of heart disease, lower risk of cancer, lower risk of type 2 diabetes. And again, if I'm just getting a ton of plants in the diet, I'm going to get enough phytochemicals. Okay, and our last category of nutrients is water. Okay, water should have maybe come first because it is the most essential nutrient. We have to consume it every day in order to survive. Okay, well, you can go a few days without water, but like only so much. About 85% of our blood, 70% of our muscles, and 75% of our brain is water. A lot of our water is found, like I said, in our blood. And we're constantly losing water every day through perspiration, through speaking as well, through respiration, and also through urine and feces, of course. So we have to constantly be taking it back. Why? We need water for all these different functions. Water is, because it's in the blood, it helps us move things around. It also provides basically an environment for chemical reactions to occur. It helps maintain body temperature. Think of sweating, okay? Lubricates joint. If I didn't have water in my, kind of in these sacs between my joints, it'd be like, it wouldn't move as fluidly and nicely as it does. Water also aids digestion. For instance, there's a process called hydrolysis, which helps to break things down in our digestive tract, removes waste, and like we said, it's used to cool the body as well. Okay, so those are 6 categories of nutrients and a very quick overview of the things that we take in from our food. Basically, all that I just talked about, I take a semester to go through in BBK 110 because we get way further into each of those, but that is as quick as of an overview of the nutrients I can do. So I will see you in the next video when we're going to start talking about more specific nutrition terminology, and then later on we'll also talk about some nutrition recommendations, including the Canadian Food Guide.